The mountain looked endless when he first appeared in the white silence, a single human figure moving across a world that seemed older than memory itself. The snow was thick everywhere, not falling now, but already present in impossible layers, covering the ground, covering the stones, covering the roots of the trees, softening every edge until the whole landscape looked like a dream that had forgotten its own shape. He stood for a moment on the rise and looked ahead in silence. There was no road here, no smoke from distant homes, no sound of engines, no sign that anyone had passed through recently. Only the cold air, the frozen trees, and that beautiful, dangerous stillness that makes a person feel very small. He had reached a place where the world was no longer asking him to hurry. It was asking something much harder. It was asking him to survive. He took in a slow breath and let it out carefully, watching the cloud of warmth vanish into the frosty air. Everything about him looked tired. His coat was dusted with snow. His boots were heavy with ice. His face carried the quiet strain of someone who had been walking for far too long, carrying too much, with no one to help him. But there was no panic in him, only a deep, practiced calm, the kind that comes when a person has already accepted that there will be no rescue waiting ahead. If he was going to spend the night in this place, then he would have to make the night on his own. He looked across the valley, where the hills rose and fell beneath the snow like frozen waves, and somewhere in that silence, he found the kind of resolve that cannot be taught. It only appears when a person understands that fear will not keep the cold away. The first thing he noticed was the wind, not the kind that roars through the trees with violence, but the kind that slides across the open land and steals warmth without being seen. It moved low and constant, threading through the valley, touching every exposed surface, searching for weakness. Out in the open, even the most beautiful place can become unforgiving very quickly. He knew that. Anyone who has spent time in winter knows that the mountain does not care how far you have walked, or how tired you are, or how badly you need rest. The mountain only responds to preparation. So he stood still for one more moment, scanning the land with patient eyes, looking for the one thing that could save him tonight. Shelter. He found it in a shallow depression beneath the edge of a slope, where the snow had collected in thick layers and the trees stood close enough together to break the wind. It was not a perfect place, not warm, not comfortable, not even especially welcoming, but it had the one thing that mattered most. It offered protection. The snowbank curved naturally against the hillside, and the branches above had gathered enough cover to soften the bitter air. He walked toward it slowly, testing the ground with each step, feeling how deep the snow was, how firm the layer beneath might be, how much work the earth would demand from him before it gave anything back. The sky above had turned a pale gold as the sun sank lower, and the whole mountain seemed to glow with that quiet winter light that makes everything feel both sacred and lonely at the same time. He knelt beside the slope and pressed his gloved hand into the snow. It was compacted on top, softer below, cold enough to sting through the fabric. He studied the shape of the land for several seconds, then rose again and began to move with purpose. There is a special kind of silence that comes over a man when he knows he has found the right place to build. It is not excitement, it is not relief, it is focus. Every motion suddenly matters. The body forgets exhaustion for a while because the mind has given it a job. He started clearing the loose snow from the entrance area, pushing it aside in measured motions, not wasting energy, not fighting the mountain, only making room inside it. The shelter would not be large, it would not be elegant. It would not be something to admire from a distance. It only had to do one thing, keep the cold out long enough for him to see morning. As he worked, the light kept changing. The white ground shifted from silver to blue to gold, and the trees stood in the distance like dark guardians watching over the valley. The scene was so breathtaking that it almost disguised the danger. That is one of winter's cruelest tricks. It can be devastating and beautiful at the same time. The man paused once and looked out over the frozen land, not because he had time to admire it, but because moments like these have a way of reminding a person why survival matters. He was not building a shelter just to stay alive. He was building it so he could remain present for another sunrise, another breath, another chance to feel the sun on his face, when the snow finally loosened its grip. The first layers of his shelter took shape slowly. He pressed snow into a low wall where the wind would hit hardest. He cleared a small hollow against the slope, enough to curl into if necessary, enough to keep his body hidden from the open air. Every handful of snow he moved seemed insignificant on its own, but all those small efforts began to change the shape of the place. The shelter was becoming something. Not much yet, but something. In the harshest conditions, progress rarely feels dramatic. It feels repetitive. It feels quiet. It feels like carrying one branch after another, scraping one frozen section at a time, bending down again and again until your back burns and your hands ache and your breath starts to shake. But survival is often built exactly that way, through small actions repeated with stubborn faith. The evening settled deeper around him while he worked. Shadows stretched long across the snowfield. The mountains in the distance turned dark blue, then grey, then almost black, while the upper sky still held a little colour, like the last trace of a candle refusing to die. He knew the temperature would drop fast once the sun disappeared, and the thought did not frighten him so much as sharpen him. He moved faster now, but still carefully, because speed without control in the cold leads only to mistakes. He gathered pine branches from beneath the trees where the snow had not buried everything completely. Their needles were dark and heavy, still carrying the scent of resin and wood, and he layered them near the shelter's edge to create insulation from the ground. It was not luxury. It was not even comfort. It was just enough separation between his body and the frozen earth to make the difference between misery and danger. By the time the sky had darkened fully, the shelter was beginning to feel like a small secret carved into the side of the mountain. The opening was narrow, just enough for one person to enter and leave. Inside, the walls were compacted with snow and reinforced where possible with branches and packed layers. It was not a place anyone would call safe in ordinary circumstances. But out here, under the weight of winter, it was enough. He stepped inside and lowered himself to a crouch. The space held the cold of the earth, but it also held something else now. It held intention. It held effort. It held the stubborn refusal of one human being to surrender quietly to the weather. The darkness outside grew thick, and the silence took on a different shape. In daylight, the valley had seemed peaceful. At night, it became immense. The snow absorbed almost every sound, leaving only the faintest whisper of movement in the trees. He listened to his own breathing for a while, measured and steady, and then to the soft scrape of fabric as he shifted his weight. He thought about how strange it is that a place can look empty and still feel full of presence. The mountain was full of presence tonight. It was in the cold air. It was in the trees. It was in the weight of snow above him. It was even in the faint trembling of the shelter walls as the temperature dropped lower and lower. The mountain did not need words to make itself understood. He reached out and checked the small space again, tightening the snow around the weak points, pressing a branch into position, smoothing the floor where he would sit. Every detail mattered. In a warm room, a person can be careless. In a place like this, carelessness is expensive. He had learned that the hard way long before this night. The body loses heat faster than most people imagine. Hands go numb. Judgment slows. Tiredness becomes dangerous. So he kept moving, not with panic, but with the disciplined rhythm of someone who understood what was at stake. Outside, the first stars appeared above the trees, bright and distant, suspended over a world made almost entirely of white and black. He needed fire, not a large one, not a roaring blaze, just enough warmth to keep the cold from settling fully into his bones. He searched for dry wood under the branches and along the sheltered side of a fallen trunk, where the snow had not touched as deeply. He carried the pieces back in his arms one by one. They were small, brittle, and cold to the touch, but they would do. He arranged them carefully near the entrance of the shelter, making sure nothing was too close to the snow walls. Then he worked patiently until the first faint spark of flame caught and trembled. At first it was almost nothing, just a weak orange shimmer in the dark. Then it strengthened. Then it became a living thing, breathing light against the frozen walls and turning the shelter into a small pocket of warmth in the middle of the mountain. The sight of that fire changed him, not in some dramatic way, It did not suddenly erase the cold, and it did not solve everything, but it gave him a center again. There is a deep human comfort in fire because it answers something ancient in us. It says, there is still warmth here. There is still time. There is still a reason to stay awake. He sat near it and held his hands toward the flame, careful not to let the heat waste away too quickly. The fire crackled softly, and the sound felt almost intimate in the silence. Outside, the wind continued to move across the valley, but now it seemed farther away, more like a memory than a threat. Inside, the small flame painted moving shadows on the walls of snow, and for the first time since he had arrived, the mountain did not feel entirely hostile. He took out a small metal container and melted snow for water, watching the steam rise in thin trails into the cold air. The process was slow, and everything in it reminded him that survival depends on patience more than strength. He could not rush the melting or force the heat to move faster. He had to wait. The snow turned to water drop by drop, and those drops became a promise that his body would not have to struggle alone through the night. As he drank, he let his gaze drift toward the shelter entrance, where darkness pressed silently against the opening. Beyond it lay the valley, the trees, the ridges, the frozen river hidden under layers of snow, and above all of it, the clear winter sky stretching wide and indifferent. The beauty outside the shelter was almost unbearable in its stillness. Moonlight fell over the snowfields and made them glow with a pale blue sheen, as though the ground itself were lit from within. The distant hills shimmered softly. The tops of the pines glittered where frost had caught on every needle. It was the kind of scene people would call magical from the safety of a warm window. But from here, inside the cold, it felt different. It felt like truth stripped to its bones. No noise to distract, no crowds, no distractions. Just a man, a mountain, and a night that could either be endured or lost to. He sat there quietly, listening to the fire, and he thought not about comfort, but about all the reasons he had kept going until this moment. There was a life somewhere behind him, somewhere far from this snow, and maybe that life had not always been easy. Maybe that was why he had learned to carry his silence so well. Time in the shelter moved strangely. Minutes felt long. Hours felt compressed. The cold outside never stopped, but it changed shape as the night deepened. At one point, the wind rose and whispered along the trees with a low, haunting sound, and he checked the fire again to make sure the shelter would remain warm enough through the darkest stretch of the night. He added another branch, then another, keeping the flame small and careful. A large fire might have looked more impressive, but impression was not the goal. Survival was. He pressed his shoulders back against the wall and let himself rest for a while, though not fully sleep, because the mind in a place like this must remain half awake, listening for any change in the weather, any weakness in the shelter, any shift in the cold. And then there were the thoughts that come only in the silence of the wilderness. Thoughts about home, about people, about the strange weight of being alone. The mountain gave him room to think, and the thoughts were not always gentle. They came with the sharp honesty that isolation forces on a person. Out here, there is no performance, no audience, no pretending. A man cannot claim to be stronger than he is because the cold exposes weakness without mercy. But perhaps that is also why places like this matter. They reveal what a person is made of when everything unnecessary has been stripped away. In the shelter's dim firelight, he looked less like a survivor from a story and more like someone who had simply chosen to keep himself alive with whatever dignity remained. The night grew deeper still, and the world outside seemed to vanish entirely. No moon, no sound, only the faint pulse of fire and the breath of the man inside the shelter. Occasionally, snow slipped from the branches above with a soft hush, and he would glance toward the entrance, waiting to see if the structure had held. It always had. The shelter trembled only slightly, enough to remind him that it was real and temporary and fragile, but it held. There is something profoundly moving about a structure made by a single pair of hands in the middle of nowhere. It is not only a shelter, it is a statement. It says, I was here. I did not disappear quietly. I made a place to live through this. Near the coldest part of the night, the fire began to shrink, and he leaned forward to protect it, feeding it with one final piece of wood he had saved for this exact moment. The flame revived, flickering brighter for a little while, and in that glow the snow walls seemed to breathe with him. He looked out through the entrance and saw the world still shining under the moonless sky, a landscape so quiet it felt almost unearthly. The snow beyond the shelter reflected the faint starlight, and the whole valley looked like a dream suspended in time. It was hard to believe that anything human could endure in a place so vast and cold. And yet he was here, warm enough, awake enough, alive. Sometime later the darkness began to loosen, not all at once but gradually, as all long nights do. The first sign was not the sun, it was the change in the air, the way the cold shifted from sharp to still, the way the shelter seemed to wait instead of endure. Then came the faint blue hint of morning beginning somewhere beyond the ridge. He opened his eyes and listened. The storm, if there had been one at all, had passed. The fire had burned low but had not died. The shelter stood. He exhaled slowly, feeling the relief settle into his chest like a weight being gently removed. He had made it through. Not because the mountain had grown kinder, but because he had respected it enough to work with it instead of against it. He stepped outside into the morning and stood for a moment without moving. The valley had changed overnight. Fresh snow lay across everything in perfect, untouched layers, bright under the first golden light. The trees stood heavy with white. The distant mountains glowed softly at their edges, and the frozen land stretched so far in every direction that it looked endless again, but now with the gentleness of dawn wrapped around it. It was breathtaking. The kind of view that makes a person forget his own smallness for one precious moment. He looked back at the shelter buried half in snow, a quiet shape tucked beneath the slope, and there was something deeply moving in that sight. A tiny refuge built by one man against the silence of winter. He walked a few steps away and paused near the trees, watching the light climb slowly over the hills. His breath drifted in front of him in pale clouds, and the entire scene felt like a reward earned through patience, endurance, and trust in simple things. The beauty of the mountain did not erase the hardship of the night. It transformed it. What had been cold and threatening in darkness now looked almost holy in the morning light. The same snow that had seemed endless and unforgiving was now blowing softly, as if the world itself had decided to forgive the struggle and let it become part of something larger. The man did not smile widely. He did not celebrate. He only stood there with the stillness of someone who understood that survival is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is just the ability to keep one's footing through the worst of the night and meet the morning without bitterness. He looked across the valley one last time, and there was gratitude in the way he held himself. Gratitude for the shelter, for the fire, for the mountain's lesson, for the fact that he could still feel the cold on his face and the warmth in his chest. These were not small things. Out here, they were everything. Far below, the snow-covered land continued to glow under the rising sun, untouched and beautiful and severe. The shelter remained behind him, half hidden, a small proof that human hands can still create hope even in the most desolate places. And as the light spread over the white world, the man turned slowly toward the open valley, ready for another day. Not because he had conquered the winter, but because he had learned how to live inside it. And sometimes that is the most powerful survival of all.